Hello, I'm Jay, owner of Volunteer Audio in Oliver Springs, and we are blessed to get to make this video and show this to you. We've got a brand new 2022 Tri Glide. This will be our first step-by-step video showing you how to upgrade your audio system on your Tri Glide. We're going to show you how to flash the radio, how to install the amp, how easy Volunteer Audio makes that step-by-step process on how that you can take this one step at a time and do this on your own and save the install labor. As well as, if you want us to do it, maybe you'll get to see just how particular we are and make an appointment and come visit us. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to do your bike. We're going to be installing the Sp 4.900. This is our latest amplifier from Hertz. In our good, better, best scenario, this is our best amplifier. It's 1,000 watt RMS. It's 2,000 watt peak. We'll be keeping the stock GTS radio and doing a set of SX165 Neo Hertz speakers in the front and a set of SV165 Neos in the tour pack. So I'll be taking a few minutes and going over why we chose these speakers later in the video. But hang out and watch as we tear this bike down, do an awesome upgrade, and show you the end result when we're finished. All right, so we get asked all the time, what's the right speaker for me to use in my build? And I wanted to go over why we chose these speakers for this particular build. First off, his friend already chose the same speakers. He's listened to it. He's very happy with the sound of his friend's bike. But we find out that most of our clientele listen to very few genres of music. If you're riding a Harley, there's a good chance you listen to classic rock, southern rock, country, 80s hair bands, even current metal. It's pretty common. You don't listen to normally a lot of modern music. Now there are people that do, so we always take the time and we ask our customer what they listen to, and then we try to pick the right system for them. Now in this case, we're probably going to see a lot of older classic music, and we want to make sure we don't have a system that's just too bright, because our older music has a lot of high range. It doesn't have a lot of bass just because of how it was originally recorded. Now jump into modern country, modern rock. I listen to contemporary Christian, some of the modern Christian music. It has a lot of bass. So we're not as worried about having too much treble with some of the modern music. But in this system, we're going to use the Hertz SX165 Neo. It's a 6.5 with a tweeter mounted in the center of it. So it's going to give us good, crisp, high range, full range music from the front. But this is a Tri Glide. It does not have rear bags. There's no way to add 6x9s. And we want to get as much bass out of the system as we can without having to add a subwoofer. Now, what's great about having a tour pack with 6.5s are the factory Harley tour packs are actually ported. So the back of the speaker is ported into the tour pack to give you good bass. But we're going to use the Hertz SV165 Neo. It's a solid mid bass. It's going to give us good mid bass response. It's going to give us really good vocals. And it plays up into that high range of roughly 3-4K. But it's not going to be as bright as another set of tweeters. And the way God made us and the way He made our ears work, when we hear more treble, we hear less bass. So if we can tone the treble down some, we're actually going to hear more of the mid bass in the system, and our tone is going to become more full and better sounding. And with that older music, it's going to sound really good. Now on top of that, we're putting an awesome amp on it. This Sp 4.900 has some serious power. In a 4-ohm configuration that we're doing here, we're really close to 200 watts RMS per set of speakers, which is going to give us even better mid-bass response than using a smaller amplifier. So between the right speakers and the right amplifier, this system is going to sound amazing, and our customer is going to be very happy. Now, if we were going a little less power, a lot of times our guys will listen to our sound room, and they may pick a precision power speaker because we find it's toned really well for that classic rock, 80s rock and such, without having to throw as much power behind it. We just want to make sure that we pick the right speaker, and that's why you'll see Volunteer Audio normally doesn't use a DSP. We're not taking the wrong speaker and trying to use a magic box to make it sound right. And we're not putting in tweeters that are way too bright, using compression horns and such, and then taking a second amp and having to turn them down. This allows us to keep a very simplistic system. It's easy to install, it sounds great, and it works for years and years to come with very, very minimal items that could possibly fail. So on to that. All of our Hertz systems are 3-year warranted, amplifier, speakers, and such, even against blowing. So we have a great system, it's easy to put in, and you're guaranteed at least 3 years with no problems out of those speakers, or we're going to take care of it. Now let's talk about our amp, because a lot of you are watching this thinking, can I do this myself? And I hope as you watch, you go, yes, I can do that. That really wasn't that hard. So we're going to do all the hard parts here at Volunteer Audio before you ever get your system. We're going to actually wire in a plug-and-play T-harness to the amplifier. This is going to allow you to simply plug this in behind the radio, take the original radio wire and plug in the other side, and all of your speaker connections have been made. This is going to mount right above the radio in this install. We've got a big piece of Velcro. It's going to put it on the factory amp plate. It's going to work great. And then we're going to simply take our fuel tank off, and I'll show you how easy that is, and run this power and ground wire back to the battery. So connection to the battery, connection to the radio. We've already preset the gains, the filters, everything that needs to be done on this amplifier. Once you flash the radio, this is set perfect. The system sounds great, and it's very, very easy. So continue to hang out. We're going to tear this bike apart, and I'll show you step by step how easy it is. All right, so I'm going to change things up just a little bit. We're going to start at the back of the bike. I'm going to go ahead and replace the speakers in the tour pack. But to do that, the first step I'm going to do, because later we need to do it anyways, I'm going to go ahead and remove our seat. On this particular one, we have a backrest. These backrests have a little tab that you push, and then they slide out. Very easy to remove. Then we're going to have one screw here at the back. It's actually a thumb screw, but it's got a place for a straight screwdriver also. You can loosen that up enough to remove it. All right, so I'm just removing the one screw at the rear of the seat. I'll set that over in our bin to make sure we get all of our bolts back in later. Now this has heated and cooled seats, so I'm sure as we come up, we're going to have to unplug something. So we'll get it lifted up and find our connection. So here we go, just gonna unplug our seat and set it over to the side. All right, so that gives us just a little bit better visual of what we're doing. Now, I've spoken with this customer. He's not really concerned about different grills. We do offer an upgraded metal grill for both the fairing and the tour pack location, but in this case, it's brand new. It's got 400 miles on it. The grills are in perfect shape, so we're gonna reuse these factory grills. All right, so I'm gonna take my T10. I'm gonna remove the 4 screws holding our speaker in. Now, we're not gonna reuse this hardware. And we don't reuse it because we have issues with the factory rubber grommets actually vibrating out when we put a lot of power on a good strong speaker. And the last thing we want is for you to be going down the road and lose your speaker, lose your grill. So we're going to actually use the screws that come with the Hertz speaker, and I'll show you how we do that. I'm just going to clock it a little bit to the side and screw it straight into the plastic instead of these little rubber inserts. All right, so we've got our 4 screws out. We're going to go ahead and remove our grill. Now you're going to see the factory Harley speaker. Now this isn't even the Boom 1 upgrade. This is just the very basic Harley. It's actually a 5 1/4 with a 6.5 inch flange. So they gave us a good place to put a large, nice speaker, but they didn't put a nice one in it. So we're going to unplug it. You're going to notice that you have a smaller terminal that's silver and a bigger terminal that's gold. The gold one is your negative. So remember that when we go back on our other speaker. These can be a little tight. All right, so we got that unplugged. Now I'm going to get our new Hertz speakers out. So let me show you something. Anytime you open up a new Hertz speaker, inside the cone, they put one of these little packs to keep moisture out. Definitely make sure you remove that, or you may have a weird noise when you're done that you're trying to figure out. That's as simple as taking this little pack out. Also, inside the speaker box is a little pack of screws. It's only taped on the underside of the cardboard, so make sure you find these. That's what we're going to be using to put our new speaker back in. And we're also going to want to take a pair of pliers and just kind of tighten up each one of these terminals because we want to make sure they're tighter and no way for them to fall off later so we don't have to remove the speaker for any reason. So here we have our new speaker. We're going to be looking at our terminals on the back. They're going to be marked on this little black part. It's stamped in a positive and a negative. We want to take that large gold terminal and connect it to the negative side of our speaker. And the positive one is going to be the silver one. It's very, very important that we get our polarity correct because if we get one of the speakers backwards from the other ones, we're not going to have good mid-bass and you're going to think something is wrong with the system or that's not really good. And a lot of times it's just an install error. And we'll show you toward the end how we do a polarity check on all the systems before we let them leave, just to make sure that we don't mess up. All right, so I'm going to take my factory grill and I'm going to position it on our speaker. And all I've done is I've rotated it just an inch or so around to make sure that we're not matching up with our factory holes. We're not going to reuse those holes. We're going to move it over a little bit so we can go straight into this plastic with the screws from Hertz. All right, you want to go in tight, but you don't want to go in enough that you strip it. And just that easy, we have our first speaker swapped out. I'm going to go get the other one done, and we'll meet back in a second and get our fairing took apart. All right, so I got our other rear speaker done. We're moving on to taking the fairing apart. We're going to start here on the side that's toward the gas tank. There's just going to be 4 T25 Torx bolts. There's going to be 2 at the top of the fairing and 2 a little lower. The longer bolts are in the top. Definitely make sure that you note that when you're going back together. If you put them in the wrong location, let's say you take it and put the long one in the bottom, as you tighten it up, you're going to put a dimple on the outside of your fairing and possibly hurt the paint. You don't want to see that happen. So short bolt in the bottom, long bolt in the top. I'll take the 2 out on the other side. All right, now that we have those bolts out, the next step, I'm going to put a fender protector on the front fender because we don't want to mess up and drop something on the front and cause a dent in the fender. All too often, if you look, almost every Harley you look at has a dent from something being dropped on it. All right, so our fender protector's on. We've got one that we've bought from Harley. It works really well. If you don't have one, get a nice towel or something, double it up, lay it over it, just to protect it if something were to fall. Now on this bike, we have these passing lamps that are mounted up a little higher. Normally you can grab those and just rotate them out. You're gonna need to do that for your fairing to come off. You don't have to normally unbolt them. I wanna show you that step. Now all that's holding our fairing on is these 3 top bolts. The outer 2 are shorter, we're gonna remove those first. The other one's long and goes all the way through. We don't have to worry about anything falling as long as that one is still in place. Take our 2 outer bolts out. Same T25 Torx driver we used on the other side. You're going to find there's very, very few tools needed to actually do this install. All right, now I'm going to loosen the middle one. And once this comes loose, our windshield should come free. So we should be able to take this bolt loose, yet leave it in place. Take our windshield out so we don't drop it somewhere. And we've got this little pack here. We're going to take it out as well. All right, now we can completely remove this bolt. And when doing so, it's not going to fall off still yet because we still have these lights and everything in the way to keep it from falling. We're just going to lean this forward and we're going to disconnect the headlight. Once that's disconnected, we can just set our fairing over to the side. All right, I love working on new bikes. This thing is spotlessly clean inside. A lot of bikes are not, just because you get to ride them, and I really hope he gets a lot of time to ride and enjoy this and make it dirty. But right now, it's nice having a clean bike to work on. Next step, we're going to remove this upper vent. It's just got 2 more T25 Torx bolts. Now, a few of these might be T27, but they're never tight enough that it really matters. The T25 is going to take it out no problem. And that just allows us to do all of this with one tool. Now, I'm removing this just to get access to remove this upper plate and where our amp's going to be going. We're going to need to be able to pull that plate so we can pull these front speaker pods to upgrade our speakers. So let me get something and undo a bunch of wiring here. All right, so I'm just going to unclip all the wiring and get everything unplugged that goes around these pods and also around the top of this plate. There's a couple push clips that we're just using our tool just to pop out. All right, once we have that, those clips undone, I'm going to start unplugging our speedometer and our fuel gauge and such. Plug these harnesses, and as we get them undone, we're just going to let it hang. I'm going to cut a zip tie here on our GPS antenna, kind of free it up from this factory harnessing. Unplug the connector here for the WIM. Also this additional connector here. Now, even if you have a wireless headset interface module installed, you still probably want to flash it while you have your Techno Research programmer on your bike, because if you flash the WIM on with that, you don't have to have a headset connected for CarPlay to work. If you rely on the WIM, you have to have a Sena headset or an HD headset connected before CarPlay will come on and work properly. All right, so now we're going to remove all the bolts that hold this plate in place. So our T25, we're going to take a little bolt out here on the back of this storage pocket. Also going to remove the bolts on each side of our speaker pods. And we're going to put all these bolts in our storage container over here, and we're going to make sure they all get reinstalled before we finish up. So this time I'm going to show you how to get to the pod bolts, removing the radio. If you have an 11 millimeter directly on a wobble, you can actually go below the radio and you can remove the 3 hard bolts with that tool. Most people don't have an 11 built into a wobble, so I'm going to show you how just a few more steps we can pull the radio out and get to those bolts easier with a straight extension and socket. All right, so I've removed all our perimeter bolts. I'm going to remove the 4 that go into the top of the radio. And all we have left now is to remove the 2 that are holding the WIM to this bracket. Now, if you don't have a WIM, you're probably not going to have these two additional bolts. And WIMs is WHIM for Wireless Headset Interface Module. That's the part you buy at Harley to allow a headset to work with your factory radio. All right. Now I'm also going to just unplug my GPS antenna because it's connected to this plate, and we're not going to have to move it. I'm just unplugging it from the back of the radio. It's this little blue connector, and there's a little tab right here on the end that you just press down to disconnect it from the radio. All right, I'm also going to remove one more bolt right here at the top of our speedometer. That's going to release the speedometer and the tachometer so we can just set it out. All right, so that's got us really good access to the top of our radio. Now we're going to keep the factory GTS radio, but if you were installing a SoundStream radio, once you remove this radio, you just put the new one back in, the new SoundStream, because it's just going to plug in to all the factory connectors and bolt in the same way. So now I'm going to unplug the harnessing from the back of the radio. Now Harley's got this little lever that opens and closes that allows you to unplug the harness. There's a little push button you push in, then you flip this over and it unplugs. We're going to unplug the factory USB. And we're going to unplug the factory AM/FM antenna. Now all of these little plugs are going to have a little tab that you just press down to release and unplug it. Don't fight it too much. Get it pressed and released because we don't want to break any of these connections on the radio. Now I'm going to take a 3/16 Allen head and remove the 4 bolts that are securing our radio in. All this hopefully makes sense in a few minutes. It's like, why are we removing the radio to the speakers? But we've got to get to a few very hard to get to bolts that are holding our speaker pods in, and this is going to make it easier on you. So I'd rather take a few minutes and remove some extra bolts as to fight this thing for a lot of extra minutes, get into them without doing this step. So let's set our radio over to the side. All right, so I'm going to continue to undo a few more connectors. So I'm going to unplug our front speaker pods on both sides. We'll be reusing all this wiring later, so we'll be plugging it back in at that part. I'm also going to go ahead and undo another connector holding this main wiring harness in to this front frame. I'm doing that so I can get this out a little bit easier. Now also unplug the connector to your cigarette lighter and get it disconnected from your pod as well. Now we've got two little plastic clips holding this plate under the radio. They're Phillips headed. If you just unscrew these, they're going to come out of the middle of these little plastic push clips. Remove both of those clips, and that's all that's securing this plate in place. All right, so we're going to be easy. There's a bunch of wires on here. This is how it is factory in all the bikes. We're just going to work this plate down and try to get this undone without unplugging any of this wiring. If you need to unplug it, that's fine. Just make sure you plug it back up when you're done. But you definitely want to look at how it's routed and make sure you don't pinch anything or hurt anything later on as you go back together. Actually unplug two of these data wires just to make this a little bit easier. We'll just make sure we plug them back in. If you don't plug these back in, your bike doesn't start when you're done. So if it doesn't start, I just told you what you left undone. All right, plate's coming loose easier now. So we're just getting this out of our way because the hard to get to bolts are right here. Now with that plate out of the way, we can go in with a standard tool and a straight socket, and we can undo those 3 bolts on each side. So let me get what I need to do that. So an 11 millimeter on our battery ratchet here, also known as a 7/16 if you've only got standard tools. I'm undoing that lower bolt. Definitely keep up with all these. They all need to go back in. These plastic pods are actually part of this frame structure. So this being a Tri Glide or a trike, whatever you want to call it, the forks are at a different angle on the front, and it's very difficult to get to one of the speaker pod bolts. You're going to have to take a wrench and get to it. And that's why it's also important that we remove that radio in this tray so we can get to where we can see it as we're getting it loose. Try to get it loose enough that I can get my fingers on it. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, when I get this bolt out, I'm not going to put it back in. Please put it back in. So many times we come behind and the hard one's been left out. But all the vibration of this fairing, see how much play there is there? This is held sturdy by those bolts. So make sure you get them back in where they're supposed to go. If Harley thought only 2 was needed, there would only be 2 in there. All right, so I got our 3rd bolt out, the harder one to get to. Now all we have left is 3 more Allen heads, same size that we just took the radio out in. That's a 3/16 around the perimeter here. Let's get all those loose. All right, once you get this last bolt out, this pod is going to be free, so make sure you get another hand on it so you don't just drop it on the ground. Got our speaker pod out. Now it's going to be as simple as removing this speaker and putting our new one in. So let's go over to the bench and take care of that. All right, so we're going to use the same T25 Torx that we used to remove our fairing bolts. All those Torx bolts around it to remove our speaker. And we're going to be reusing these bolts to secure our new speaker in. All right, got all 4 screws out. Again, we have the same 5 1/4 inch speaker with the 6 1/2 inch basket that they used in the rear tour pack. Definitely a super low quality speaker. One way to tell for sure is this magnet doesn't even stick to metal at all, versus we can take our new Hertz speaker and it will actually connect to the wall, to our metal we have here. There's just no magnetic properties. That's how a speaker works. You've got to have a pretty good sized magnet to handle power. It helps efficiency, it helps overall sound, but this was just a factory solution like most factory speakers, just something to give you sound so that you'll buy it and get out of the showroom. All right, so we're going to do the same step we did in the back. We're going to go ahead and tighten up both of these terminals. The large terminal, in the back it was gold, in the front it is black. That large terminal is our negative, so we want to put that on the negative side of our speaker. The clear one, which is the smaller terminal, is our positive. Try to get it to properly plug in here. These factory wires want to slide out versus plugging all the way in. Definitely, as you get these in, double check that they're tight, that you can't easily unplug them. Interesting enough, I'm having an issue out of this one. Staying where it's supposed to go. As I go to plug it in, it's sliding out of its sleeve. So I may just have to grip it here in the middle so it can't slide and then plug it in. All right, that seemed to work better. We're all the way in and we're very tight. Now Hertz has done a good job of making a direct drop-in speaker. You'll notice there's a little tab here, factory, that stuck out and centered up this speaker, went through this little hole. Hertz, because this is an actual motorcycle speaker built for your Harley, put the same tab. So that's going to line up here on the bottom. And then we're going to use our factory screws here with our T25 to go right back in place. Now Hertz did add a little gasket on the back side so we can seal it up so that our pods stay sealed. It gives you better mid-bass response when they seal well. Factory, they didn't even have a gasket there to keep the air from escaping. So we want to tighten these down to the point that it compresses that gasket, but this is plastic. So the reason we use hand tools on a lot of this is we don't want to strip it out. So go till it's tight, but don't go to the point that you strip it. All right, so all 4 of our screws are back in. Our speaker's mounted nice. Everything is good and tight. Let's put it back on the bike. All right, so let's get our pod back on. I'm going to go ahead and start with those outer 3/16 Allen head bolts. Put those in first. All these bolts go into little brass inserts, so definitely make sure you start them straight. If they start to bind at all, back them out and start over, because you definitely don't want to get them in there cross-threaded. All right, so those 3 are in. Let's go to the hard ones now. We'll start on the hardest one first, because that's how I normally do things, get the hard one out of the way. Let's reach back up in here to the one that fork was in the way of. Get it started by hand. I'm going to start the other ones by hand as well. All 3 are started. I'm going to take my ratchet, tighten the 2 that I can get to with my tool. All right. I'm going to take my wrench, go ahead and tighten up that 3rd bolt. All right, that's back in and tight. I'm going to go ahead and remove the other pod, swap the speaker. We'll catch back up here in a minute when we're putting the plate back in and the radio back in place. All right, so our second pod we've taken off, put our speaker in, reinstalled it just like we did on this side. It's the exact same steps. I didn't want to bore you going through the whole process. So now we're going to put our plate back under our radio now that we have everything tight. All the bolts, even the hard ones, have been reinstalled. I'll work this wiring up through here. There's 2 little tabs on the back of this plate. They're little plastic tabs that stick through 2 different guide holes. So you want to line those up as you're going. Once you get those in place, it'll go all the way in where you can put those little plastic retainers that we originally took out back in place to hold it. Dropped a portion of that earlier today. All right, so now we can put our clip in. All right, that's back in place. Now don't forget now what we said earlier to plug these back in. If these are not plugged in, the bike will not start later. We've got to make sure it still runs when we're done. Kind of very important. All right, so all of that's in place. Let's drop our radio back in. So put our 4 3/16 Allen heads back in that originally we took out to take the radio out. I'm just going to do exactly what we did removing it, just in the opposite order. Our instrumentation back in. Gauge surround's just slightly bigger on this one for some reason, but it's all lined back up. So I'm going to take our plate and drop it back in the top here. So this is the plate we're going to be mounting our amp on here in a few minutes. It's also where Harley normally puts the factory boom amp if they have one installed. We'll start these bolts. I'm not going to tighten these until we get all of our side ones in as well. We get each one of these in their hole and get them started a few threads. Sometimes these can be just a little difficult to start. That's why we're starting them before we get them tight. So we can kind of flex things around to make the bolts line up. Now that all the perimeter ones are in place, I'm going to go ahead and tighten them all up. We should be good to get them to line up with our radio and such now. So I'm going to go ahead and put the bolts back in for the WIM. Remember, if you don't have a WIM, this step is not going to apply to you. Right, now we just have 4 more bolts into the top of the radio. I'm going to start off 4 before I tighten them, just in case we need to flex it around a little. All right, we got it tight. All right, so all of our bolts are back in on our plate. Now we're going to take some isopropyl rubbing alcohol. I'm going to clean this and we're going to stick our new amp in place, and now we'll start doing our wiring right after that. All right, so I've got a paper towel with some isopropyl alcohol. Just going to clean this surface. It's not real dirty. Again, this bike's pretty much brand new, so not much there to clean off. Now this is our Hertz amplifier. Now if you get this amp from us, it's going to be completely preset and there's going to be a cap on this end. Now every install that I do here, I double check all of these settings on every install to make sure that they're right. So we're continually making sure that if there's a different software update from Harley or a change in something along manufacturing, that we catch it before you ever get it. So all I do is pull the Velcro cover off and stick it here in the fairing. Sticks in there really nice. not only do we have gravity, we have a flat place, and we have a piece of Velcro. It's not going anywhere. So let's do a little bit of wiring here. First, we're going to get all this factory wiring back up here where it was before we took everything loose. Snap it in all those places that you took it out earlier. Follow your way around the speaker pod. Plug your front speakers back in. Plug in your gauges. Other front speakers getting plugged in, and also our cigarette lighter, or power outlet, whatever you want to call it now. All right, so all the factory wiring is back where it was. Now we get to show you what to do with this new radio wiring. So we are going to plug in our original FM antenna. Always those rear antennas, I know a lot of you guys want to delete them. It works so much better when you have a masked antenna. Just about any other option kind of comes up short as far as reception goes. So we're going to take our GPS antenna, we're going to plug it back in. And we're going to have to find that factory USB. We're going to need that. Now, so here was our original radio plug you're going to see on our harness. That we're just going to plug it in to that original radio plug, just as if it was the back of the radio. We're going to take the other end of this plug now. We're just going to plug it into the radio. That simple, we have our inputs and outputs of our amps all connected. Now I'm going to route all this wiring up and around the top here. We're going to zip tie it down and secure it, make all of this look nice. So I'm going to take a few minutes and do that. We'll catch back up with you here in just a second. All right, so there's really no right or wrong way to route this harnessing. What I normally try to do is just route it up and connect it to other factory harnessing with zip ties, just to keep everything up and somewhat clean. So if you do have to take the fairing off to do any work, these wires aren't just hanging and falling in place. As well as securing it up is going to keep it from getting pinched or stuck somewhere it shouldn't be, and it's going to keep us from having any damage to it. So I want to talk about our amp turn-on wire. We are using the factory radio. If we were using a SoundStream radio, this would be pre-wired into our SoundStream harness. But with the factory radio, we're going to have to plug this into one of the connections in the fairing. There's a couple accessory connections. There's one right up here at the end of our amp. There's another one normally on this side, which it's already being used for some other accessory on this bike. So we're going to take the one up here at the end of our amp. It's got a little block off already installed in it. We're just going to remove that block off, and the amp remote wire, this blue wire, just plugs right into that factory port. So that's got us where when we turn our ignition on, our amp's going to come on. When we cut it off, it's going to go back off. So there is no amp draw. There's nothing to run our battery down from this installation. All right, one more zip tie there. We're going to move to removing the gas tank next. Once we get it off, we'll route our power and ground back to our battery, and we'll pretty much be done with this install. All right, so now we're going to do something that a lot of people think is scary and a big task, but it's actually very easy to do. We're going to remove this fuel tank so we can properly run that power and ground back to the battery. So we're going to have a fuel vent on this side we're just going to pull out. We're going to unplug our fuel sending unit. We're also going to unplug another connector below it. It's another black plug just going from the fuel tank into here. So I'm unplugging both of these connectors. We're also going to just unplug this other fuel vent here that goes down below. Now it's a 13mm bolt on each side at the rear of the tank. There are 2 at the front of the tank also. We're just going to remove those with our battery ratchet. Now, at the front of your tank, there's 2 little rubber caps, one on each side. Just remove these caps and you'll find your bolt right behind it. All right, now let's disconnect our fuel line. All right, so this is a very easy process also. So you'll see this stainless sleeve on your fuel line here. If you just move that sleeve upward, it's going to disconnect the fuel line. So it's just going to slide out the bottom. It's going to cut the fuel off at the same time. So just that easy, we disconnected our fuel. We don't have to worry about this thing if it's full or empty or how much fuel's in it. It's not going to continue to leak out. All right, so now we're ready just to remove our gas tank. And this one is completely full of fuel. All right, so now that we have our tank off, we're going to be removing this cover. This is called the backbone of the bike. So we're going to remove this backbone cover. It's going to give us all our factory harnessing. That's where Harley ran the wiring. That's where we think you need to also. So we're going to be pulling these little lines loose here. Actually, the only place you had to do it was up here. The rest of it will stay in place. Take a knife and I'm just going to cut the edge of this tape. They've ran some cloth style tape around the edges of this. We just cut that so we can remove this cover. So normally it helps if you've got a small screwdriver. You can put in here and just unclip each one of the little clips. Secure this on. Hopefully I've got our tape cut enough to let us off here. Normally it does. Move each clip and work your way up the backbone. All right, so all of our tape to the side, got this unclipped, and now we've exposed that wiring all the way back to our battery. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and remove the battery cover. So as we route our wiring back, we can go ahead and connect it. So same tool you just used to take the gas tank off, just a 13mm, will take the bolts for the battery cover off. All right, so we're also going to unplug anything that's plugged into the top of this cover. Just kind of get it out of your way. So unclip your ECM off the top of the cover, and now the cover should be able to be removed. Exposing our battery so we can get to our connections. All right, so your battery cover has this little clip on it that goes in on a little metal clip. So you're going to need to push to the front and bring it up over that to remove it. All right, so I'm going to take our power and ground wire that's in our fairing. I'm just going to route it up here next to and follow that factory wiring to our backbone. And pull out most of the excess just to make sure we have enough to go to our battery, and then tuck that back in this covered area. All right, so I've got our new power and ground wire. We're just going to feed it into this same area where all this factory wiring goes. Sometimes I'll just take and push the wiring over a little bit so we can fit to the side. It's going to leave us plenty of lead out here. You'll see we've already installed a fuse holder. The fuse is already in there, so you don't have to worry about putting that in. All right, so we're going to take our cover, being mindful of the wiring that's up here, start snapping it back over, making sure that everything goes back into the right place. You see a wire trying to make its way out the side, just make sure you push it back in before you push your clip down. Snap it in place. All right, we're going to put our tape right back over where it was. Or make sure our brake lines go back into their holders. All right, everything looks good. We're coming out the right end. Now it's time to just put our gas tank back on. All right, we got our tank set back in place. We'll take our 4 bolts and put them back in. You want to start these before you tighten any of them. So let's just finish tightening them up. And don't forget to put your 2 little rubber caps over the front. All right. So before we reconnect all the other parts from the fuel tank, we're going to go ahead and connect our power and ground to our battery. All right, so we're going to take our black wire and we're going to put it on our negative post. Always try to make sure that we just face that wiring toward the front of the bike. That way our cover goes back on correctly later. Put our positive on. Now, I've had people make comments like, can't you get shocked? Well, as long as you don't touch the positive and negative terminals together on the battery, there's not going to be anything that's going to arc out. And no, 12 volt doesn't normally shock you. So whether you put the positive or the negative on first, it's really not going to matter, as long as you just don't touch them together. All right, so now that we have that done, we're going to tuck this wiring in front of the battery down into this open hole. You'll notice there's an area here, but there's really nothing else, and it's a good spot to tuck the fuse holder. I'm going to get our battery part back on first, and then I'll tuck it where I want it. So our battery cover, feed it in here. So our battery cover is where it goes. I'll go ahead and bolt it in place. All right. Let's get everything else back where it goes. Each one of these connectors have a little tab that they clip onto. We want to make sure we put them back where they were. ECM is going to snap back into this bracket, like so. That's going to let me see where I needed to put that fuse holder, so I kind of waited till now. There we go. Going to plug in our sending units from our gas tank. Black one on the bottom, gray one on the top. This is our connector for our heated seats. We want to leave it exposed on this one. All right, and now we've got our fuel vent. So one of them just runs right down this side of the motor. There's a little zip tie down at the bottom that holds it off the exhaust, which we want to make sure we do as well. We'll add a zip tie in there here in a few minutes. Let's reconnect our other vent. At that point, all of our wiring under our seat's done, and we're ready to put our seat back on. So we're going to do that now. I'll do a few settings on the amp, and we'll jump back at the front and put the fairing back on. Rear seat bolt's not quite as easy as it is on a non-Tri Glide, but it's not too difficult either. It's a little harder to line up. Put our backrest back in place. Last but not least, let's get that fuel line fuel vent zip tied up here. All right, so I want to take a second to talk about speaker polarity. So at this point, normally in the install, I've done this over and over and over. We've built hundreds and hundreds of bikes that we've done audio systems in. And I always find that I need to check on a Harley the polarity. So there's a couple different polarity checkers out there. There's this little one here that's about $45. These are about $10 to $15, depending on where you get them from or when it is. But all it is a little microphone that listens to the speaker, and you play a track off YouTube. We've got a place that we do it from, and we play a track. It's going to give us 3 positive and then 1 negative little sounds. And this thing will pick it up. So if I get 3 green lights and a red light, our speakers are in phase. If I get 3 red lights and a green light, it's out of phase. Now the important part is that they're all the same way. So if all of your speakers have 3 red lights and a green light, you're good. If they all have 3 green lights and a red light, you're good. But in a lot of cases, we find that Harley's actually wired some of the speakers backwards factory. So even though you've done your due diligence and you've looked at the positive and negative terminals and you've matched them up appropriately and you get done with your install, you could have speakers out of phase. Now, why does this matter? If we have 2 speakers out of phase from the other 2, we lose all of our mid-bass response. About 200 hertz on our sound spectrum is completely wiped out. So that means all of a sudden we don't have any mid-bass. And when you don't have mid-bass, all you hear is the treble from the tweeters and it never sounds right. So this is a good example. This is a brand new bike. It's 400 miles on it. It's a 2022. We just installed everything as I know to be completely correct. We did not run new rear wiring. We reused the factory wiring, and our rear speakers are out of phase. Now I've seen this before in other installs. I just had one at our last event that Rockford had installed, and the guy came to us because he was unhappy. We listened to it. I could tell from my listening that it was out of phase. We tested it with the same tester. We found out on that Tri Glide it was out of phase in the rear also. So it's very important when you get done with your system, if you think it doesn't have any mid-bass, don't blame the speaker, don't blame the installer, which could be you. Get one of these little testers. Like I say, $10 to $15. You can buy one of these on the internet, run that YouTube track through, reach out to us if you got questions on how to do it, and check your speakers, because I just got done with this new bike and my back speakers are out of phase. Now I'm going to run that track real quick so you can hear what it sounds like and kind of show this to you. Hopefully you can see it. So let me tell you what you're seeing, because it's hard to see. On this little, there's two lights. And I'm getting 3 green lights and a red light on the front. And when I go to the back ones, I get 3 red lights and a green light. It just lets me know it's out of phase. Now I'm going to reverse the polarity on our rear speakers. That's going to take care of the problem. It's going to make it sound so much better. And this is a common occurrence. We see quite often in Harleys. It may be one of the front pods is actually pinned backwards factory, or one of the rear speakers. Sometimes we see 2 of them are out. And no matter what, whether it be 1, 2, or 3 out of phase, it makes a huge difference to correct that. So no matter who does it, whether you have it professionally done or you do it or you buy a kit from us or somewhere else, check the polarity of your speakers and you're going to have a much better sounding system. So I'm going to fix this and then we'll get back into our fairing. All right, so everything is done. All we're doing now is some reassembly. Sounds amazing. We did a little polarity check on it, got a little sneak peek at what it sounds like, and it sounds awesome. So we're going to reinstall this upper vent using the original bolts that we just took out earlier. Using your T25 to reinstall them. Hard to see sometimes up in these holes. Come on, line up. Take 3. All right, try it again. Sometimes these bolts are a little harder than others to line up. There we go. Finally got it started. Let's get our other one in. All right, so now we're just going to plug our headlight back in. Actually, I'm going to drop this in behind these lights first. Then plug my headlight in. All right, I always put that center bolt in, and that just lets us kind of let the fairing hang by that bolt as we line the rest of them up. Make sure that all of our wiring is still under here, and it is, just like it's supposed to be. All right, so I'm going to start our bolts on our inner fairing coming out. Remember, again, I'm not going to say it just so many times, but the top bolt is the longer one. I don't want you to have any problems with paint by putting these in the wrong place. And do the shorter bolt here at the bottom. I'm just going to start all of these. I find that if I start them all, everything lines up better, everything looks better at the end. Start them all before you tighten anything. So a lot of guys have asked me for a video on a Tri Glide. I'm really excited I'm finally able to answer all those people that asked for it. We just don't seem to have a lot of them here in our location here in East Tennessee. There's just not a lot of people buying the Tri Glides, but it seems like overall throughout the country there's quite a few of them. I'm going to go ahead and slide our little bag in place, and then our windshield. Sometimes stacking the bag and the windshield gives you a little bit of a different gap around the top of the windshield. There's not much you can do for it when you put that much thickness here, when factory it wasn't supposed to be that thick. Good news is everything we put in is waterproof, so if any water does get in the fairing, we don't have to worry about any damage happening to our amplifier. It's IPX6 rated, so it's completely submersible. And tightening these bolts, we put the long bolt in the middle, got our shorter ones on both sides. Kind of get those tightened down. And our fairing's back together. All we got to do now is just straighten up our little parking lots here in the front. And our install is almost complete, because the last step, the one I always forget, is plugging in the fuel line to the gas tank. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then we'll be done. Just like you did before, just lift that little silver sleeve up, push the fuel line in, it'll click, and you're done. I'm going to do that now, and we're finished. All right, so let's fire this thing up and do a quick listen to it. All right, so we've got it done. I think it sounds awesome, but I'm gonna let you hear it. I've got to play copyright-free music. That's just part of it. YouTube and Facebook won't let us share the videos with somebody else's protected content, but I think you'll get the idea that it sounds really good. It's really difficult not to get this to blow our mics out and make it sound bad, but we're gonna try our best. I'll go up so loud and let you hear how clear it is. I may go a little louder, and it may get distorted, but understand here, this thing is crystal clear. Well, let's check it out and see how good the bass is and how good the treble is. All right, so I got to tell you, I never thought I would ever have an audio system that I thought was too loud. But I've got this same system on my bike, and after listening to it at high volumes, you get to where you feel like you just left a concert. Your ears don't quite work right. It's hard to hear people, so I got to throw out this disclaimer. If you damage your hearing from something being way too loud, well, it's on you. You need to turn it down a little bit. But this system is too loud. It is so loud that you couldn't leave it at full volume for extended amounts of time without causing hearing damage. But that's awesome, because we don't have to go that loud. And that means all of our equipment is designed to handle that kind of abuse, to put that kind of output out. And we're going to have it, probably 3/4 volume while riding down the road, still listening to it over the engine, over the wind, over everything else. It's going to be plenty loud, and things aren't going to blow up. They're going to continue to last. And we get a lot of extra clarity. We get a lot of extra longevity by building a system that way. But thank you for watching. Hopefully we'll get a walk away toward the end. That's my plan. Maybe we can show the reaction of the owner as he picks it up. But you never know what tomorrow holds. But just keep watching. We'll see what we have toward the end of the video. All right, so here we got Al's bike done. He's here to pick it up. His new Tri Glide. This got the Hertz Sp 4.900 amplifier, the big 2,000 watt amp. Hertz SX165 Neos in the front. SV165 Neos in the tour pack. But it's time to let you listen to it, so we're going to fire it up. We're going to do a quick walk away. I'm going to be playing one of our copyright-free songs, and we're going to be using Apple CarPlay since we flashed it on, so let's get it playing. Or 6.5. This thing's got some killer bass. Always love getting to the end. This final result is always amazing. His bike sounds killer. Al is very, very happy. And I'm sure all his friends will want to come down and get their bike done too. If you want to get yours done, definitely reach out to us at Volunteer Audio. It's 1-844-30-AUDIO. If you want to do this yourself, I just did a full step-by-step video showing you how you could do it on your own. And we're going to do all the hard parts here before we ship it. You can find those kids at volunteeraudio.com. Also call us at 1-844-30-AUDIO if you've got questions about which kit to purchase. Definitely like this video, subscribe to our channel to see more content like this. and share it. Tell your friends about it. If you have any questions, comment below. I'll be quick to answer. But check this thing out. Still sounds awesome. We're over 100 feet away already. Now, Al's new Tri Glide sounds just as good as it looks. This thing's brand new. Just wasn't loud enough for him, as most Harleys. Crisp highs, good clear bass, and plenty of volume. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, God bless and have a great day.